The crew of the USS Kirk set out on April 29, 1975, to defend Marine helicopters taking part in the evacuation of South Vietnam against any possible attacks by North Vietnamese aircrafts. However, what happened that day was completely different than any expectations that they could have had. Saigon was falling, marking the end of the Vietnam War. Fearing retribution, many South Vietnamese citizens fled the country as fast as they could and by whatever means they could find. Many headed toward the sea in the safety of the U.S. 7th Fleet, on helicopters or aircraft. This is where the story of the USS Kirk begins. South Vietnamese helicopters, packed with refugees, flew out to where the Kirk was undertaking its anti-aircraft mission. Hugh Doyle, chief engineer on the USS Kirk, chronicled what happened next on cassette tapes that he sent home as audio letters.
I'm sure you know by this time Vietnam has surrendered and the mass panic-stricken retreat has already taken place. The North Vietnamese Air Force started flying out. We looked up at the horizon though, and pretty soon all you could see were helicopters.
Despite having only a dangerously small flight deck, the Kirk's captain, Paul Jacobs, displayed great leadership and courage when he took the individual initiative to send a signal to the nearest helicopter, giving it permission to land. Jacobs understood that he had to take the risk to save these innocent civilians from certain death so that their legacies could live on. The landing was difficult, but once the refugees were unloaded, Jacobs radioed for the next chopper to make its way to the landing deck. The arrival of the second helicopter filled the Kirk's tiny landing pad to capacity, but a swarm of choppers still buzzed the Kirk, their pilots increasingly anxious as their fuel ran low. Wanting to help save as many refugees as possible, Jacobs and his crew started pushing off helicopters to make room for more to land. Helicopter after helicopter tumbled into the South China Sea, and, after backbreaking work, the crew of the Kirk had rescued around 200 refugees. However, Tuan Nguyen's helicopter still circled.
I saw a lot of American ships. So when I circling around, this is American ship, and they have one heliport, one heli deck on the back. And when I just landed and dropped off my family and my friend's family out, and I just shut down. And then suddenly the order come up, oh no, you cannot shut down here. You have to take off. I hovering on top of the water. So only one thing we do is kill the engine and I let it drop. I unbuckle my seatbelt, and then when I make sure the plate don't hit me. And so I think that's I get a blessing sometimes for them. So I'm okay when I go down to the water and I come up. I come up, and then the canoe from the Navy pick me up and bring me to the ship to help my family.
Jacobs and his crew ferried the refugees to a larger ship more capable of taking care of their needs. Because of the leadership exhibited by Jacob and the crew of the Kirk as Vietnam crumbled, more than 200 refugees survived their ordeal and took their first step toward a legacy of freedom and a life in the United States. Even after such an eventful day, though, the Kirk's mission of mercy was still not complete. Not only did hundreds of Vietnamese flee the fall of Saigon by helicopter, but tens of thousands fled their crumbling nation by sea.
With about 30,000 people, because our ships are not very big. The ship normally would handle about 100 crew members, now have to handle about 2,000.
The flotilla of ships, led by Captain Kim Do, with its desperate human cargo, sailed to Con Son Island, where they were told to wait for the 7th Fleet. Paul Jacobs, the captain of the Kirk, tells what happens next.
He says, we're going to have to send you back to rescue the Vietnamese Navy. We forgot them, and if you don't get them, or any part of them, they're all probably going to be killed.
On May 1st, 1975, the Kirk and its crew sailed to Con Son Island and located the ships of the South Vietnamese Navy that they had been sent to aid.
I was a captain in the Navy, and Kirk was a ship that was designated to come to our rendezvous point to get our ship to the Philippines. And we learned that we are going to Philippines from the Kirk. So Kirk get back to Con Son Island, and then we all follow Kirk to the Philippine Island.
Through it all, the crew of the Kirk, prepared for war but pressed by necessity into humanitarian duty, displayed continued individual leadership in service of the living legacy that was represented by the refugees. But their problems were far from over. After the fall of Saigon, the government of the Philippines had quickly recognized Vietnam as one whole communist nation. Vietnam's new government had reported the Kirk's armada of ships from the South Vietnamese Navy as having been stolen and demanded their return. Jacobs realized that the legacy of survival of the South Vietnamese refugees was in peril, and he exhibited great leadership in developing a solution. He and his crew located 32 American flags for the ships that they had rescued, because if they wanted to be able to safely enter the Philippines, they would need to fly under the U.S. flag. They distributed one to each ship, and everyone was able to make a safe entry. After the drama of their arrival, the U.S. took official custody of all of these ships.
We didn't have anything left. We lost our country, so help us to save some face. And let's have a decent ceremony of flag raising and flag down. In that ceremony to turn over the ship to the American fleet.
The immigrants aboard the Kirk's armada were relocated to a refugee camp in Guam, and after receiving sponsorships from families all over America, they were able to begin life anew in the United States. The Kirk refugees were among the first major wave of Vietnamese immigration to the United States in the wake of the Vietnam War, and were instrumental to founding vibrant Vietnamese émigré communities in Los Angeles, Houston, New Orleans, and Washington, D.C. Arriving in the United States with nothing but their dreams, the Vietnamese émigré communities are now integral elements of the American body politic, counting poets, scientists, politicians, sports stars, writers, and movie stars among their numbers. These vibrant communities are now a living legacy of the actions of the crew of the USS Kirk. Leadership that enabled survival. Leadership that enabled legacy. After all that they had been through, the brave sailors aboard the Kirk had saved thousands of lives who would carry on this legacy of survival because of the leadership that the crew of the Kirk was willing to take. This leadership is still a cherished memory within the legacy of the Vietnamese community.
But what Kirk did is beyond its mission. The way the crew of the Kirk treat our people is something that we need to stress for. That this is a show of a lot of humanity, compassion, and really spontaneous compassion. You have to see those sailors. They are really, really helping us. That's why we are very, very grateful to the U.S. sailor through the image of the Kirk crew member and the captain particularly.
And the bravery and actions of all of these heroic leaders is remembered and enshrined by the Vietnamese community in the United States, the community that is their legacy.